We're back live tonight on In Focus. South Africa's economy turned up a surprise, 1.6% growth in the 3 months to end September, pushing GDP to the highest it's ever been. 8 industrial sectors showed positive growth, with agriculture, forestry and fishing shooting up more than 19%, while exports increased 4.2%. The economy beat the forecast by economists and analysts after a 0.7% decline in the second quarter. All this amid the negative impact of load shedding. Joining us now to share how South Africa can leverage the growth to effect social reform is Cosatu Parliamentary Officer Tony Ehrenreich. Tony, good evening. Good to have you, and thank you very much for your time.
Good evening. Thank you.
I've heard some economists saying it's more luck than good that got us this 1.6% growth, because there's really nothing that we are doing that is right at the moment. Infrastructure is not up to standard. The energy generation is not up to standard. So there is no possibility that it is something that we are doing that is giving us this growth, except for some things that are happening in the globe that really have got nothing to do with us. What do you say?
Well, I think one should start by saying that the economists are amongst those people who can just tell us where it's wet after it's rained. They're unable to predict what it is that we need to do and what is going to come about. They've proven themselves to really be fixated on making sure we have a kind of economic growth that is premised on making sure that the wealthier gets wealthier. From our side, as an organization that represents workers, we think that the fact that we've been able to turn around the second quarter that had a 0.7% decline in economic activity to a 1.6 increase in general in gross domestic product, that's a very positive feature for the economy. But it's clear that a lot more needs to be done. In the area of what's brought us to the point, we think that the fact that we have a mechanism that looks at ensuring that we promote localization, that's driving a lot of the economic growth. The infrastructure program that's unfolded, some of those benefits are coming home to roost. And what we've got to do is to ensure that we develop the economy in a way that promotes the raising of the disposable income levels of poorer communities, because the South African economy is really 60% reliant on consumer demand to grow the economy. We know that it's poorer working class communities that buy the basic goods on our shelves and that gets our factories pumping to produce more. The wealthy are just looking what's the latest Mercedes coming out of Germany, or where can they buy the new Gucci's or new Apple iPhone. We've got to look at premising the economy on ensuring that we respond to the needs of the majority of our people, because they bear the brunt of apartheid, they bear the brunt of the legacy of underdevelopment in our economy, and even some failings after the ANC's come to power that needs to be turned around as a matter of urgency so that we can address this bloodbath of job losses and ensure that the economy grows in a way that the majority of our population are able to raise their living standards and in that way generate greater economic activity.
Looking at the 10 industries that contributed to this growth, agriculture contributing the most, surging by more than 19%. It's a seasonal industry, one would say, where we can't really say that we will be able to maintain this degree and this level of growth going forward, because we're not sure how the weather will respond, for example. There are variables that we cannot predict, particularly in this sector. How could we harness that growth?
Well, the agricultural sector has grown, and it's grown mainly on the back of exports of agricultural products. So a lot of the European Union agreements, some of the agreements we have with AGOA in the United States, and some of the other trade agreements that we have that are sucking imports from South Africa's agricultural sector, that's leading to the growth. So clearly government policy and government orientation had created the environment for that. We've got to continue growing the agricultural sectors. We've got to grow tourism. Manufacturing is absolutely essential. And for that, we've got to see that where there's programs run by government, that those are predicated on buying local products produced by South African workers. And the government's drive towards localization is important to keep the economy going. The one challenge we have, of course, is the deep levels of corruption we've seen. So besides the elites, both in the ANC and in the country, fighting for control and for extravagant wealth, we also have a situation that many of the procurement managers in many areas of state institutions, what they're doing is buying where they get a kickback from imported products and not from locally produced products. And in spite of the government's policy saying they must, we see that level of corruption that's taken place during the 9 wasted years under President Zuma and some of the people that still reside in the cabinet. That corrupt practices are continuing, and that's something we've got to stop urgently, because that's restraint on the economic activity, on economic growth, and the potential for investment in South Africa. So we've got to deal with the measures that grow the economy, and we've got to stop the corruption that curtails the economy growing. And in that way, South Africa has many, many possibilities. We know that the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is starting to see positive aspects accruing to South Africa, where we're setting up plants and distribution centers in the rest of the continent, and we're creating opportunities for those countries in South Africa. That's got to be the foundation of economic growth in the African continent that sees all of our neighbors grow with us, and that is longer-term sustainable development for the continent and for South Africa as probably the most diversified economy on the African continent, with the potential to benefit most from increased trading opportunities.
Yeah. Tony, what do you say to those who are saying, well, we are creating opportunities for our neighbors to come and do trade with us here in South Africa, but the big challenge is that we won't be able to give them the energy, no matter how much we want to see the growth and more players coming in. If we can't guarantee that they will be able to keep the lights on, that would be an exercise in futility.
Of course, energy is a fundamental constraint to the economy, and this is one of the areas that has to be addressed as a matter of urgency. If anything, this is a failure of the government. Way back in 2000, 2004, when they should have invested in building new power stations, where they were fixated on trying to attract the private sector into energy generation, they failed in that. And so what we've got to do now is to make sure that we arrest the decline of the power stations, that we make sure the new power stations we built at tremendous cost with lots of corruption, that comes on stream in a productive, consistent way, so that we have stability of supply. And the renewable energy streams that we've now regulated to be able to come on stream, that is promoted. But we must be careful, and we must remind ourselves that the reason why we've been able to roll out electricity to close on to 95% of the citizens of South Africa, whereas under apartheid it was only around 42% that had access to electricity, is exactly because it was a state-owned enterprise that focused on promoting the development needs of the country. So even now, as we're getting renewables in, we've got to make sure that Eskom is properly managed, that the financial situation is addressed, that the corruption that had taken place there is reversed. That money must be recouped so that money can be invested in both maintenance programs and the development of renewable energies in Eskom as well as in the private sector. But energy supply and consistent energy supply is absolutely essential for the manufacturing sector and for attracting investment. And we think the government must do more around that. The platitudes that we've heard from many of the leaders in government is not enough. We've got to see the actual measures unfolding in Eskom, an end to the corruption, stop selling second-class coal into our fire stations, stop the corruption that's happening there, and then we'll be able to see that on the basis of consistent electricity supply, the rest of the economy will grow more consistently. But we're encouraged by the 1.7% growth. We want to ensure that the economy keeps on that trajectory, because that's what's going to lead to greater economic growth, and that's going to lead to greater employment opportunities. The greatest challenge affecting our country is the huge levels of inequality, probably the highest in the world, and the levels of unemployment. We've got to provide our young people with hope, with employment opportunities, and with them making a constructive contribution to the economy. But we've got to put in place the mechanisms to bring us there. Clearly, there's space for us to tax the wealthy more. There's space for us to make sure that the elites in our society don't govern our country in their interest, whether they're white or black, but that the country is governed in the interest of the majority, and their economic growth on the basis of a strong localization program will be the foundation of the economy moving forward, and all of us having much better opportunities and prospects for the future.
What's your take on the fight for control within the governing party and how that is going to impact, for example, on growth? There are others who are looking, for example, at the 2024 year as a year where we are likely not going to be focusing much on growth, but largely it will be an election year in the country, and that would be a focus on power and control. But also within the ANC currently, there's a lot of focus on control more than it is on the policies and the things that we need to be putting in place for us to grow.
Absolutely. It is clear that the ANC still is by far the party that has the most support in South Africa. So it is an important political player. Whether one supports them or not, you can't deny the fact that they fundamental the future of South Africa. But the deep levels of corruption, those guilty of it must go to jail. The ANC members more so because there's a greater obligation on leaders to behave ethically than there is necessarily on the ordinary citizens. So those who've been corrupt, put them in jail immediately, show that we're addressing the problems. But what we've seen is that there's a fight amongst the elites. On all of the faction, they have the elites, they have those who live extravagant lifestyles with more money than they need. They're completely disconnected from the average ANC member. And so we've got to ensure that those elites in their fights for control and power doesn't destroy the organization that represents hope and confidence of our people. That's going to be a key battle going forward. And if we don't bring the kind of political stability, we're going to pay for that with economic stability, where we're not going to be able to attract the kind of investments that we have. But all of those things must be in place, as well as ensuring that the tax regime in South Africa, that the redistribution program in South Africa ensures that it builds a society that's more sustainable, that's more equitable, and that brings our people closer together. A kind of economy that's built on the elites wanting to enrich themselves further will do nothing for our long-term prospects and needs as the country. And so general members of the ANC, all members of political parties, because they're all corrupt in some shape or form, if one looks at what they're up to. And the members must take control of their organizations to make sure that the organizations in politics, in our parliamentary democracy that we have, that all of those leaders focus on what the key challenges in our country is. We've got to come together and work together and build together. But that only happens in an environment where we seem to be a South African incorporated. The elites in our country, whether it's white monopoly capital or black monopoly capital, are through their squabbling and fights destroying our opportunities for the future. And we've got to take control of that, whether it's with a revised electoral act or with other measures. We've got to mobilize our societies to make sure that our country is on the right track, that the economy grows, and that the benefits thereof accrue to all of our people.
Yeah. Quick one on that. How do you suggest we should revise the Electoral Act?
Well, I think the Electoral Act has gone through some changes. It's clear that it's not far enough. There's been lots of criticism, but we're moving in the right direction. This is the key dilemma for South Africa. We are making progress as a country, but we're not moving as fast as we should have, and we certainly have the potential to move faster. So with the Electoral Act, make sure that it serves the needs of the people and not the party bosses or the political leadership in government institutions. Power and democracy is about benefiting the people, not benefiting the elites. And we can see in that regard that the first 29 years of democracy has seen the elites benefit. And that pact between the white and the black elites have left our people out in the cold. Now is the opportunity for us to make sure. And Cyril Ramaphosa is still the best of the candidates we have amongst the people there. We've seen many of the others contaminated by allegations of corruption and many practices that should not have no place amongst a political leader. So President Ramaphosa has made some mistakes. We can't condone that. But we must be clear and we must be cold and calculated by saying that this is still the president that can lead both the renewal of the country, the renewal of the ANC, stop corruption, grow the economy, create job opportunities, but do it in a way that ensures that our country is able to develop in a sustainable way with the continent and, of course, in a globe where we've got to get more peace. All right. It's not desirable that Russia and Ukraine fights, and the implications there are vast with us. We've got to make sure that we intervene in all of the matters that have bearing on the lives of our people, and the president's shown himself to be capable of doing that. But he must come home, and he must focus on the key challenges at home, and he must move more decisively to imprison those who are corrupt and get the economy moving in the right direction with sustainable electricity, a key localization program, and the skills and investment so that small businesses are able to thrive and create opportunities for entrepreneurs and greater employment opportunities.
Tony Ehrenreich, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on tonight.